A biker's daughter was told she'd never walk again, but a forgotten boy from the streets saw a different future. What began in secret would defy doctors, ignite a war, and reveal a love powerful enough to challenge destiny itself. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. The heavy steel door of the clubhouse garage clanged shut, but for Alina, the sound of her father's motorcycle was already a distant memory. She sat by the window in her wheelchair, her fingers tracing the cold glass. Outside, the world was moving. Inside, she was stuck. Her legs, the doctors had said with sad, final smiles, were just for show now. The bullet meant for her father, Mark, the president of the Iron Saints, had found her spine instead. The rival club was ashes now. Her father had made sure of that, but his revenge didn't fill the empty feeling in her legs. Her world had become this: the first-floor apartment attached to the clubhouse, the view of the gritty alley, and the watchful eyes of the brothers. They were kind, in their rough way, bringing her burgers and shiny trinkets they couldn't legally explain, but their pity was a cage as strong as any. That's when she first saw the boy. He was a shadow in the alley, a skinny figure darting behind the dumpster as Big Paul took out the trash. Paul growled something and the shadow vanished, but he came back. Alina started watching for him. He slept in a nest of cardboard against the brick wall, hidden from the rain by the clubhouse's overhang. He was maybe her age, 19, with dark, watchful eyes that missed nothing. She learned his name one afternoon when she was alone on the back patio, struggling to reach a book she'd dropped. Daniel, a voice said. It was quiet but clear. She jumped, turning her head. He was there on the other side of the chain-link fence, his fingers curled in the wire. He looked like he was ready to run. "What?" Alina asked. "My name, it's Daniel." He didn't move. His eyes went to the book on the ground, then back to her chair. "You want me to get that?" And that's how it began. He passed the book through a hole in the fence. Their fingers didn't touch. He disappeared before she could say thank you, but he was back the next day and the next. He'd appear like a ghost, sometimes with a wildflower picked from a crack in the pavement, sometimes just to sit silently on his side of the fence while she read. One Tuesday she was furious. A new doctor, another scan, the same useless words: permanent, adapt, accept. She hurled her physical therapy band across the patio. It sailed over the fence. Daniel picked it up. He didn't hand it back. He just looked at the stretchy tube, then at her. "They teach you anything good with this?" "No, it's stupid. It doesn't do anything." A slow, sly smile spread across his face. It changed him completely. "My mom was a dancer before she got sick. She taught me balance games, said they were magic." He stretched the band between his hands. "Your doctors ever try magic?" Alina snorted. "No." "Want to?" It was a stupid question, but the look in his eye wasn't pity. It was a challenge. "What do I do?" "First," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper as he glanced toward the clubhouse door, "you don't tell the scary guys with the skull tattoos." That made her laugh, a real laugh that felt strange in her throat. "Deal." The first game was simple. He had her sit forward in her chair, press her feet flat on the ground, and just feel the weight, feel the pressure in her soles. "Close your eyes," he instructed. "Tell me if you feel more pressure on your left foot or right." She felt nothing, just the same dull, faraway void. "Nothing, Daniel, this is dumb." "SHHH, not with your brain, with your ghost." He sounded embarrassed. "The part of you that's still there, even if it's sleeping, just try." She tried again. For a week it was just that. Sitting, pressing, feeling nothing. Then one rainy afternoon she felt it. A faint sensation, like the ghost of a touch, on her right heel. "Daniel," she gasped, her eyes flying open. "I felt something, like a tickle." His grin was like the sun breaking through the alley's gloom. "Told you, magic." The games got harder. He'd have her try to lift her heel while keeping her toes down just a millimeter. He'd roll a tennis ball to her foot and have her try to stop it, not with her hand, but by moving her leg. She failed over and over. The ball would hit her limp foot and roll away. But sometimes, after failing 100 times, her foot would twitch, just a jerk, a spasm. Daniel would celebrate like she'd won a marathon. He started coming closer. One day, he slipped through the hole in the fence. He was inside her world, the safe, guarded patio. He was so close she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, smell the scent of rain and concrete on his old jacket. The air between them felt charged, like before a lightning strike. "New game," he said, his voice a little husky. "You're going to stand up." Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. "I can't." "You're not going to walk, you're just going to visit, for 1 second. I'll be right here." He stood in front of her, his hands held out. She looked at his palms, calloused and scarred. She trusted them more than the sterile gloves of any doctor. She gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles white. With a grunt of effort, she pushed. Her body rose, shaking violently. Her legs were useless noodles. She started to crumple immediately. But he was there. His arms went around her, catching her weight. He held her up, her body pressed against his. She was standing, or rather he was standing for her. Her face was buried in the worn fabric of his shirt. She could feel his heart beat wild and fast against her cheek. He was warm, so warm. They stayed like that for a long, breathless moment. His breath stirred her hair. Her hands, which had been gripping the chair, slowly came up and rested on his arms. The muscles there were tight, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "See," he whispered into her hair, his voice thick. "Visiting." From the clubhouse window, Mark watched, his daughter in the arms of a ragged street kid. His first instinct was fury, a red-hot bolt that told him to storm out there and break the boy in half. But he saw the look on Elena's face. It wasn't fear. It was alive. He hadn't seen that look since before the shooting. He stepped back from the window, his jaw clenched. He'd watch, for now. The secret lessons became their world. Daniel taught her his street magic, how to find her center of gravity by imagining a string pulling from the top of her head, how to shift her weight by thinking about pouring water from one side of her body to the other. It was silly, it was profound, and it was working. One afternoon, she managed to lift her right foot entirely off the ground for 3 full seconds. She screamed with joy. Daniel whooped, picked her up from the chair and spun her around. They were both laughing, breathless, her arms around his neck. When he stopped spinning, they were nose to nose. The laughter died. The air crackled. His gaze dropped to her lips. She leaned in just a fraction. The patio door banged open. Big Paul stood there, a scowl on his face. "Boss wants to see you, kid, now." The clubhouse was a temple of leather, smoke, and steel. Mark sat on his throne-like chair at the head of a scarred table, his lieutenants, James and David, flanking him. Daniel was shoved into the room, standing small before them. "You've been spending time with my daughter," Mark said, his voice low and flat. "Yes, sir," Daniel said, holding his gaze. He didn't look away. "Why?" Daniel swallowed. "She's teaching me to read. I'm teaching her to balance." A rough laugh came from David. "Balance? She's in a chair, street rat." Mark held up a hand, silencing him. His eyes never left Daniel. "The doctors say she's paralyzed for life." Daniel's courage seemed to solidify. "With all respect, sir, the doctors don't know everything. My mom, she had a disease. They said she'd never walk again either. She did, for a whole year. She taught me the things I'm showing Elena." The room was silent. Mark leaned forward. "And where is your mom now?" Daniel's eyes glistened, but he didn't blink. "Gone. After that year it took her. I've been on my own since." Mark studied him. He saw the dirt, but he also saw the straight spine, the clear eyes. He saw the defiant hope. It was a dangerous thing to have in this world. "You care for her?" "Yes, sir." "You hurt her," Mark said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper, "and you won't need to worry about being homeless. You won't need a home at all. Understood?" "Understood." "You can stay in the old tool shed. You get a bed, food. You stay away from club business. Your only job is her. Can you do that?" Daniel's breath left him in a rush. Yes, sir, thank you." Life changed. Daniel had a roof, a thin mattress, and a hot meal every day. He became a fixture. The brothers, skeptical at first, warmed to him when they saw the light returning to Elena's eyes. They'd find him in the garage, tinkering with an old motorcycle engine, and would grudgingly show him a thing or two. He had a quick mind and clever hands. But with Elena, it was a different kind of magic. The charged moments grew more frequent, more intense. During a balance exercise, she'd lose her footing and fall against him, and he'd hold her steady, his hands lingering on her waist. Their eyes would lock, and the whole world would shrink to that point of contact. He'd read to her, his voice soft by the light of a single bulb in the shed, and she'd watch the way his lips moved, imagining what it would be like to kiss him. The tension was a sweet, aching pull between them, a secret conversation spoken in glances and accidental touches. Months passed, the first snow dusted the alley, and then the impossible happened. They were in the heated garage. Elena was holding onto the frame of an old, stripped-down bike, practicing standing. Daniel was a few feet away. "Okay," he said, "today you're going to let go." "Daniel, no, I'm not ready." "Yes, you are, your ghost is awake. It's shouting, just let go, I'm right here." Trembling, she peeled her fingers away from the cold metal. She was standing on her own, shaking like a leaf, but standing. Her legs screamed in protest, a fire of pins and needles that was pure, beautiful agony. "Now," Daniel said, his voice trembling with hope, "look at me, just take one step, just one, visit me." She looked at him, at his outstretched hand. She focused everything she had. Her right leg moved. It was a clumsy, dragging thing, more of a shuffle than a step, but her foot lifted off the ground and moved forward 6 inches. It landed with a solid thud. The world stopped. Elena looked down at her foot, then at Daniel. His face was wet with tears. A sob ripped from her throat. She tried the left foot. Another shuffle, another thud. She was walking. 2 steps, 3. She was a toddler, wobbling, collapsing forward. He caught her as he always did, but this time they sank to the ground together, laughing and crying. She had done it, the impossible. That's when the garage door roared open. Mark stood there, having heard the commotion. He saw his daughter on the floor, Daniel holding her, and for a terrible second, he thought she'd fallen. He started forward, rage on his face. Then Elena looked up, her face radiant with tears. "Daddy," she breathed, "watch." With Daniel's help, she pushed herself up. She stood, swaying. She took one step, then another, away from Daniel and toward her father. 5 shaky, glorious steps. Mark the Reaper O'Sullivan, president of the Iron Saints, a man who had faced down death 100 times, fell to his knees. The tough, tattooed biker broke down, great heaving sobs racking his frame. Elena reached him, her hands coming to rest on his broad shoulders. He wrapped his arms carefully around her legs, weeping into her sweater. Over her shoulder, he looked at Daniel, the homeless boy from the alley, the boy who had done what all his power and money and vengeance could not. Mark gave him a single, slow nod. It wasn't just thanks, it was acceptance, it was respect. That night the clubhouse threw a party. It was loud, raucous, full of beer and cheers. Elena sat on a bar stool, her legs aching but singing with life, surrounded by her extended family of outlaws. Daniel was by her side, wearing a clean shirt of James's, looking like he'd landed on another planet. Later they escaped to the back patio. The cold air felt good. She leaned against the wall and he stood in front of her, his hands in his pockets. "You gave me my life back," she whispered. "You gave me mine first," he said. He finally closed the distance. Their first kiss was soft, a gentle press of lips that held all the hope, all the pain, and all the impossible magic of the last few months. It was sweet and charged, a promise of everything that was yet to come. But from the shadows of the alley beyond the fence, a pair of eyes watched. A man in a dark leather cut, different from the Saints' emblem. He watched the kiss, watched the celebration inside through the windows. He pulled out a phone, dialed a number. "Yeah," the man muttered. "It's true, the Sullivan girl is walking, and that street kid everyone's talking about is the reason why." He listened, his eyes narrowing. "The boss wants to know what we should do. The Saints are stronger than ever with this miracle." He paused, then a cruel smile spread across his face. "Understood, hit the kid. It'll break her and it'll break Mark. We'll hit them tomorrow." He slipped back into the darkness, just as Daniel pulled Elena closer, unaware that their impossible happiness had just painted a target on his back. The party raged on inside, a tidal wave of noise and joy that Elena and Daniel had escaped. Out on the cold, quiet patio, the world was just the two of them and the steam of their breath mixing in the air. The kiss had changed everything and nothing. It felt like the most natural end to a story that had begun with a dropped book and a quiet voice from the other side of a fence. He pulled back just an inch, his forehead resting against hers. "Elena," he whispered, her name a prayer on his lips. She smiled, a real, unguarded smile that made her face ache. "I know." She didn't need to say more. She laced her fingers with his, feeling the rough calluses against her palm. "I'm cold." "We should go back in," he said, but he didn't move. "In a minute." They stood like that, holding onto the quiet. Inside, they could hear Big Paul telling a loud, exaggerated version of the story, claiming he'd known Daniel was a little genius all along. They both laughed softly. Daniel's thumb stroked the back of her hand, a slow, unconscious movement that sent shivers up her arm that had nothing to do with the cold. "What happens now?" Daniel asked, the question hanging between them. "Now," Elena said, squeezing his hand, "you don't sleep in a shed. You get a real room, and you help me get strong enough to kick your butt at pool." He laughed, a warm, rich sound. "Deal." But the peace was fragile, a soap bubble shining in the alley's dim light. The man watching from the shadows had melted away, his message delivered. The Vipers in the grass, a rival club called the Vipers, had been nursing their hatred since Mark had destroyed their chapter. The news of Elena's recovery wasn't a miracle to them, it was a threat. The Saints' morale was now sky-high, Mark invincible, but every king has a weak spot. For Mark, it was his daughter, and now clearly the boy. The next morning, the real world rushed back in. Elena was sore in muscles she'd forgotten existed, a pain she welcomed like a gift. Daniel was in the garage early, helping James tune up his Harley. Mark watched from his office doorway, a cup of coffee in his hand. He saw the easy way Daniel handed James tools, the focused nod he gave instructions. The kid was a quick study, not just with Elena, with everything. Mark walked out into the garage. The men fell silent, nodding. "Daniel," Mark said. Daniel straightened up, wiping grease on his jeans. "Yes, sir." "You're off shed duty. The room next to Elena is empty. It's yours." Daniel's eyes widened. "Thank you, Mr. O'Sullivan." "It's Mark. When you live under my roof, you use my name." It was a huge gesture. A name was a connection. Daniel understood. "Thank you, Mark." Mark gave another nod, then his eyes shifted to his daughter, who was slowly, carefully walking along the length of the workbench, her fingers trailing for balance. Pride swelled in his chest, so fierce it hurt. "We have a run today, a business meeting upstate. We'll be back by nightfall. James, David, you're with me. Paul, you hold down the fort. Watch them." His last words were low, meant only for Big Paul, who stood by the door. Paul's small eyes flicked to Elena and Daniel, and he gave a grim nod. The roar of the departing motorcycles shook the windows an hour later. The clubhouse felt strangely empty without them. Elena practiced her walking, moving from the couch to the chair and back, counting her steps. Daniel was her spotter, always an arm's length away, his presence a steady comfort. 10 steps, she panted, collapsing onto the couch. "That's 2 more than yesterday." "You're pushing too hard," he said, sitting beside her. He pulled her feet into his lap and started rubbing them gently. The touch was intimate, caring. She leaned her head back, closing her eyes. This was a different kind of magic. "I have to catch up for 2 years," she murmured. "You have a lifetime," he said softly. His hands stilled for a moment. "Elena, about last night." She opened her eyes, looking at him. "Yes." "It wasn't just because of the walking or the moment. I mean, it was, but it's more." He struggled for the words, his street-smart confidence melting into teenage awkwardness. You're the first good thing that's happened to me since my mom." She reached out, touching his cheek. "You're my first good thing since the bullets, Daniel." He turned his head, kissing her palm. The charged air was back, humming between them. He leaned in, and this kiss was not soft or exploring. It was hungry, full of all the fear and hope and desperate longing they'd both been holding back. Her hands came up, tangling in his hair. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer until she was practically in his lap. They were lost in it, in the heat and the promise, when a loud, deliberate cough sounded from the doorway. They sprang apart like guilty children. Big Paul stood there, an unreadable expression on his broad face. He held up a set of car keys. "Boss's orders. You two are climbing the walls in here. I'm to take you for a drive. Get some air, no arguments." Elena blinked, still breathless. "A drive where?" "Somewhere that isn't here. A park, the lake, something." Paul jangled the keys. 5 minutes, be out front." He turned and left. Daniel let out a long, shaky breath, resting his forehead against Elena's shoulder. She giggled, the sound light and free. "He's right, let's get out of here." They bundled up. Elena insisted on walking to the car, a big, black SUV that belonged to the club. Paul held the passenger door open for her, his eyes constantly scanning the street. Daniel climbed in the back. The drive was quiet, the radio playing low. They left the city behind, heading for a state park mark sometimes used for private meetings. It was deserted this time of year. Paul parked in a scenic overlook. "1 hour," he grunted. "Stretch your legs, don't wander far, I'll be right here." He settled into the driver's seat, pulling out a newspaper, a clear signal he wasn't going to hover. It was beautiful. Frost coated the bare trees, and the lake below was a sheet of steel-gray ice. Elena walked carefully on the gravel path, Daniel beside her, his hand under her elbow, ready to catch her. She didn't need it as much, but she liked the excuse to touch him. "It's so quiet," she said. "Too quiet," Daniel murmured, his survival instincts prickling. He'd spent too long on the streets not to feel when a scene was wrong. The empty park, the single car in the lot. It felt staged. He glanced back at the SUV. Paul was still reading his paper. "Let's head back a little early," Daniel said, trying to keep his voice light. Elena was about to agree when the sound reached them. Not from the road, but from the woods to their left. The deep, throaty growl of motorcycle engines, multiple ones, coming fast through the trees on some hidden trail. Daniel's blood ran cold. "Elena, run." "What?" "Run back to the car now." He grabbed her hand and yanked her into a stumbling run. The gravel skidded under her feet. She tried, her legs burning, but she couldn't move fast enough. The trees exploded. 3 bikes, ridden by men in Viper cuts, shot out of the woods and skidded to a halt, blocking the path back to the SUV. The lead rider grinned, his teeth yellow under his helmet's visor. He revved his engine. From the SUV, Big Paul threw his door open, his hand going to the gun at his back, but he was too far. A 4th bike, which had come silently down the road, pulled up behind the SUV, blocking Paul in. The rider leveled a shotgun at Paul's window. It was a perfect trap. "Get the girl," the lead Viper yelled. "The boy is the bonus." One of the riders gunned his bike straight for them. Daniel didn't think. He shoved Elena sideways, off the path and down a slight, snowy bank toward the frozen lake. She fell with a cry, tumbling into the brush. The bike swerved, missing Daniel by inches. The rider skidded, turning for another pass. Daniel stood his ground on the path, a skinny kid facing down a roaring machine. He was a diversion. He had to be. "Daniel," Elena screamed from the bank. The lead Viper got off his bike, pulling a long, metal pipe from a holster on his bike. "You're the miracle worker, huh?" he sneered, advancing on Daniel. "Let's see you fix yourself." From the SUV, Big Paul made his choice. He couldn't get a clean shot with the shotgun on him, so he gunned the engine in reverse, slamming violently into the bike behind him. The crunch of metal was loud. The shotgun went off, blowing out the SUV's rear window. Paul was out of the car in an instant, a bear of a man with a pistol in his hand. He fired twice. The Viper with the shotgun fell. But on the path, it was too late. The lead Viper swung the pipe. Daniel ducked the first blow, but the second caught him across the shoulders. He went down with a grunt of pain. "Daniel," this time, Elena's scream was raw with terror. She scrambled up the bank, not walking, not thinking, just moving on pure adrenaline. She grabbed a thick, frozen branch from the ground. The Viper raised the pipe over the fallen Daniel. "This is for the saints," he spat. The branch cracked across the Viper's helmet, not hard enough to hurt him through the helmet, but hard enough to surprise him. He staggered, turning. Elena stood there, chest heaving, holding the broken branch like a baseball bat. Her legs were trembling, but she was standing, fighting. The viper laughed, a cruel, ugly sound. "Look at that, she can walk, let's fix that too." He turned his back on Daniel and advanced on Alina. That was his mistake. Pain exploded in Daniel's world, but Alina was in danger. He pushed himself up. He saw the viper's bike idling just feet away. He didn't know how to ride, but he knew engines and he knew desperation. He lunged for the bike, grabbing the handlebars. He twisted the throttle wildly and shoved the bike forward with all his strength, aiming it like a missile. The heavy motorcycle crashed into the back of the viper's legs just as he reached for Alina. The man howled, knocked forward onto his knees. Alina jumped back, stumbling. A shot rang out, then another. Big Paul, having dealt with the man at the car, was running toward them, firing. One of the other vipers on a bike cried out, clutching his arm. The lead viper on the ground saw his men scattering. The trap had failed. He scrambled up, limping badly, and made a run for one of the remaining bikes. "Paul, don't let him go," Daniel yelled, but it was too late. The viper kicked his bike to life and roared off into the woods, his two surviving members following him. Silence rushed back in, broken only by the hiss of the downed bike and Paul's ragged breathing. Paul ran to them, his face a mask of fury and fear. "Are you hit, either of you?" Alina shook her head numb. She dropped the branch and fell to her knees beside Daniel, who was sitting on the ground, clutching his shoulder. "You're bleeding," she whispered, her hands fluttering over him. "It's okay, it's just from the pipe, I'm okay." He pulled her into a one-armed hug, holding her tight. She was shaking violently. Paul was already on his phone, his voice a low, urgent growl. "Mark, we've been hit. Vipers at the Overlook. The kids are okay, shaken up. One got away, he knows, he saw her walking." He listened, his jaw clenching. "Yeah, we're coming home, now." The ride back to the clubhouse was a silent, tense nightmare. Alina held a wad of napkins to the cut on Daniel's shoulder. He held her other hand, both of them covered in dirt and snow and fear. The clubhouse was an armed camp when they arrived. The remaining brothers were there, guns out, faces like stone. Mark's bike skidded to a halt in the alley just as Paul pulled in. Mark was off the bike before the engine died, running to the SUV. He yanked the door open. His eyes took in his daughter, alive, unhurt, out of her chair. Then he saw the blood on Daniel's shirt, the terror in their eyes. A primal rage, colder and deeper than anything before, settled over him. "Inside," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. The story tumbled out in the war room. Paul's report was blunt. Daniel filled in the gaps, his voice steady despite the pain. Alina just held onto his good arm. When they finished, Mark looked at Daniel. "You pushed her out of the way, you used his own bike as a weapon." Daniel nodded. Mark stood up. He walked around the table and stopped in front of Daniel. For a long moment, he just looked at him. Then, he did something no one expected. He held out his hand. Daniel, confused, took it. Mark pulled him to his feet and into a brief, powerful bear hug, clapping him on the back. "You saved my daughter, again." He let him go, his hands on Daniel's shoulders. "You're not a guest anymore, son, you're family. And nobody touches my family." He turned to his men. "The Vipers just declared war on a miracle. We're going to show them what happens when you do that." His plan was swift, brutal, and final. They would hit the Vipers' main clubhouse that night. No warnings, no negotiations. They would erase the threat. "I want in," Daniel said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. "Daniel, no," Alina pleaded. "They came for me too," he said, looking at Mark. "They called me the bonus. I'm not a kid you need to protect in a shed anymore. I want to help. I can't shoot, but I can drive. I can cause a distraction. I owe them." His eyes were hard, the homeless boy gone, replaced by a young man who had found something to fight for. Mark considered it. He saw the fire, the same fierce protectiveness he felt. He nodded. "You ride with Paul. You do exactly what he says. You're a lookout, nothing more." That night, the Saints rolled out in force. Alina was left in the clubhouse with two older brothers guarding the doors. She paced, walked the floor, sick with worry. The assault was a masterpiece of violent precision. While the main force hit the front of the Viper clubhouse with noise and fury, Paul and Daniel, in a beat-up van, circled to the back alley. Their job was to block the escape route. Daniel sat in the passenger seat, his heart hammering against his ribs. He heard the shouts, the crashes, the pop-pop-pop of distant gunfire. Then the back door of the Viper clubhouse burst open. Men ran out. Among them, limping, was the lead Viper from the park. He saw the van, saw Paul behind the wheel, and raised a pistol. "Down," Paul roared. But Daniel was already moving, not down. He shoved his door open and rolled out onto the filthy alley pavement. The Viper's shot went wide, hitting the van's windshield. Paul returned fire from inside the van. The Viper turned to run, but his injured leg gave out. He fell, and when he looked up, Daniel was standing over him, holding a tire iron he'd grabbed from the van floor. The Viper's eyes widened in recognition. "You." "This is for her," Daniel said, his voice cold, and he brought the iron down, not on the man's head, but on the pistol hand still clutching the gun. There was a sickening crack. The man screamed. Daniel kicked the gun away, standing over him, breathing hard, the weapon raised for another blow. He stopped. He looked at the broken, frightened man on the ground. This wasn't him. He wasn't a killer. He was the boy who taught balance games. He lowered the tire iron. Paul was there then, hauling the Viper up. "Good restraint, kid," he grunted. "Boss will want to talk to him." The cleanup was swift. The Vipers were broken, their leadership captured. Mark's message was sent. The war was over before it truly began. Back at the Saints' clubhouse as dawn broke, the mood was grim but satisfied. They were safe, truly safe. Mark found Elena and Daniel on the back patio, the same place where it all began. They were sitting together on a bench, a blanket over their shoulders, watching the sun turn the sky pink. Daniel's shoulder was professionally bandaged. Mark sat down heavily beside them. He didn't speak for a while, then he put a hand on Daniel's knee and a hand on Elena. "The doc says the shoulder will heal fine. And you," he looked at Elena, "you walked. You really walked, and you fought." "I was scared," Elena whispered. "Brave people always are," Mark said. He sighed, the weight of the night on him. "It's done. The Empire stands, but more than that, this family stands, stronger." He looked at Daniel, really looked at him, the boy who had come from nothing, who had given everything. "You have a place here, for as long as you want it, more than a place. You're one of us now. If you want the ink, you'll get it when you're ready." Daniel's throat worked. He had a family, a real one. He nodded, unable to speak. Mark stood up, squeezing their shoulders. "I'll leave you to it." When he was gone, Daniel turned to Elena. The rising sun lit her face, and she had never looked more beautiful. "He called me son," Daniel said, his voice full of wonder. Elena smiled, leaning her head on his good shoulder. "That's because you are, in every way that matters." She tilted her face up to his. "My miracle worker." This kiss was different from the others. It wasn't about discovery or hunger or fear. It was a promise of mornings like this, of a future they had both fought for and won. It was soft and deep and tasted like the dawn. In the alley, the dumpster was still there. The fence still had a hole, but the cardboard nest was gone, blown away by the wind. A new chapter had begun, not in the shadows, but in the warm, guarded light of a home. The biker's daughter was walking. The homeless boy had a family, and together they had done the impossible. Thank you for feeling every step of this journey with us. Did this story of impossible hope and fierce loyalty remind you that miracles can come from the most unexpected places? If it moved you, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. What would you have done for a love like that?